Subscribe to Incredible Detective Stories and enjoy watching. The rain in this city doesn't wash anything away. That is a lie they tell you in movies. In reality, the rain here just makes the grime slicker. It presses the smog down onto the pavement until the air tastes like wet ash and old pennies. I stood under the yellow crime scene tape, watching the water drip off the brim of my hat. It was 3 in the morning. The kind of hour when the city usually holds its breath, but tonight, the sky was tearing itself apart. Thunder rattled the windows of the skyscrapers above us. It felt like the whole world was shaking. My name is Jack Thorne. I write the crime column for the City Chronicle. I have been doing it for 22 years. I have seen enough bodies to fill a stadium, but you never really get used to the ones that land on the pavement. Gravity is a cruel judge. It leaves nothing to the imagination. The body on the ground was covered by a tarp, but the wind kept whipping the corners up. I caught a glimpse of an expensive Italian loafer. One shoe on, one shoe off. That was the detail that stuck. It always does. The trivial things become the loudest when death is in the room. Detective Miller was standing near the body, shielding his notebook from the downpour. He looked as tired as I felt. We go back a long way, Miller and I. We are both relics of a time when this city had rules. Now it just has victims. Jemper, Miller said, seeing me approach. He didn't look up. He just kept scribbling. 20th floor. Penthouse suite. No signs of struggle. Door locked from the inside. I looked up at the building. The obsidian tower. Glass and steel, vanishing into the low clouds. It was a fortress for the untouchables. Who was he? I asked. Arthur Vane, hedge fund manager. You know the type. Made a killing shorting the housing market last year. Looks like his conscience finally caught up with him. I snorted. Conscience. Men like Vane don't have a conscience, Miller. They have PR teams. I moved closer to the tarp. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming a frantic rhythm on the plastic. I looked at the ground around the body. The impact had been violent, but something bothered me. Where is the other shoe? I asked. Miller pointed toward the sewer grate about 10 feet away. Bounced, or flew off. Physics is messy from 20 stories up. I walked over to the grate. The shoe was there, wedged against the metal bars. But it wasn't just lying there. It was placed. The toe was pointing perfectly toward the street, the heel resting squarely on the concrete lip. It looked deliberate, like a marker. Did you find a note? I asked, turning back to Miller. Yeah, typed. Standard stuff. I can't live with the guilt. I'm sorry. It was on his desk, next to a glass of scotch. Typed. I asked. It happens, Miller shrugged. People type everything these days. Handwriting is a dying art. I looked at the building again. 20th floor. Locked from the inside. A typed note. A shoe that looked like it had been parked rather than thrown. It feels too clean, I said. Miller finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed shadows in the flashing blue lights of the cruiser. Don't start, Jack. It's pouring rain. It's 3 a.m. The guy lost millions last week. He took the express elevator down. Case closed. But it wasn't closed. I could feel it in my gut. That old, familiar itch that tells you the picture is crooked. I looked at the shoe again. Mind if I go up? I asked. Miller sighed, a long exhale of smoke and frustration. 5 minutes. Don't touch anything. And for God's sake, don't write that I let you in. The elevator ride to the 20th floor was smooth and silent. It was a vacuum, sealed capsule lifting me away from the noise of the street. My ears popped. The apartment smelled of leather and lemon polish. It was a museum of wealth, cold and impersonal. The forensic team was dusting the balcony doors. I walked to the desk. The suicide note was still there, sealed in an evidence bag now. I peered at it. The font was generic, Arial maybe, no signature. Just the typed name at the bottom, Arthur Vane. Next to the desk there was a bookshelf. Leather-bound classics that had probably never been opened. I scanned the spines. Dickens, Tolstoy, Plato. Then I saw it, a gap in the dust. The shelves were immaculate, except for one spot on the second shelf. A small rectangle of lighter wood, where something had been sitting recently. It wasn't a book. It was too small. Maybe a picture frame. A clock. I leaned in closer. There was a faint scratch on the wood, leading away from the empty spot. Fresh. I walked to the balcony doors. They were open to the storm. The wind sucked the curtains out into the night like ghosts trying to escape. I stepped out onto the terrace. The railing was wet and slick. I looked down. The police lights below were just blurry stars in a galaxy of wet asphalt. It takes a lot of willpower to climb over a railing like this. It takes hesitation. You usually find scuff marks on the outside of the ledge, where the person stood, changing their mind a dozen times before the final leap. I shone my penlight on the ledge. Nothing. No scuffs. No frantic heel marks. It was smooth. Arthur Vane didn't hesitate. Or he didn't jump. He was poured over the edge. I went back inside. A young officer was packing up a camera. "Did you find anything else on the desk?" I asked him. "Besides the note and the scotch." "Just a pen," the kid said. "And a coaster. No phone." "It was in his pocket. Screen smashed." I nodded. I took one last look at the room. It felt staged. It felt like a set in a play where the actors had already left. The silence was heavy, artificial. I left the apartment and went back down to the street. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was angrier. "Well?" Miller asked. He was lighting a cigarette, cupping his hands against the wind. "He didn't jump, Miller," I said. Miller rolled his eyes. "Here we go. The Jack Thorne conspiracy hour." There were no hesitation marks on the railing. The note was typed and unsigned. And there's a missing item from his bookshelf. Someone was there. The door was locked from the inside. Jack. Deadbolt. Chain. We had to break it down. Then how did they get out? Miller blew smoke into the rain. They didn't. Because nobody else was there. Go home, Jack. Get some sleep. Write the obituary. Sad banker takes flight. It's a classic. I watched the coroner load the body into the van. The doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed in the wet street. I walked back to my car. My wipers were fighting a losing battle against the deluge. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine idle. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote down 3 words. A shoe. Dust. Lock. The locked room mystery is a staple of fiction. In reality, it usually means you missed something simple. But tonight, I didn't think I was missing anything. I thought I was seeing something nobody else wanted to see. Arthur Vane wasn't the first. I remembered a file on my desk from 2 months ago. A city councilman, found in his garage. Carbon monoxide, note on the dashboard, typed. And before that, a judge, overdose, note on the nightstand, typed. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going home. I was going to the archives. The night was just beginning, and the dead were starting to talk. The archives of the City Chronicle are located in the basement of our building. It is a place where time goes to die. Rows of metal filing cabinets stand like tombstones under flickering fluorescent lights. The air down here is dry and smells of old paper and decaying glue. It is my favorite place in the city. I sat at a wooden table that was scarred with cigarette burns from the 70s. A stack of files lay in front of me. I had pulled every suicide report from the last 6 months involving a high-profile public figure. There were 5. Arthur Vane was the latest. Before him, Councilman Robert Holloway, found in his running car. Before him, Judge Elena Ross, overdose of sleeping pills. Before her, a surgeon named Dr. Marcus Sterling, slit wrists in his bathtub. And the first one 6 months ago, a tech CEO named Julian Reed, hanged in his loft. 5 dead pillars of society. 5 suicides. I opened the files and spread the photos out. I wasn't looking for gore. I was looking for patterns. The police look for fingerprints and DNA. A reporter looks for the narrative. I started with the notes. I had copies of the police reports for the first 4. Every single one mentioned a suicide note. Holloway. A typed note found on the passenger seat. Ross typed note found on the bedside table. Sterling Dove typed note found on the sinks. Reed typed note found on the floor. A Miller was right that people type things. But all of them. A judge, a woman of letters, typing a suicide note. A surgeon, a man who lived by his hands, not leaving a handwritten goodbye. It was possible. But it was statistically thin. I looked closer at the crime scene photos. I had to squint to see the details in the grainy black, and white Xeroxes. In Holloway's garage, the tools on the workbench were arranged by size, perfectly parallel. In Judge Ross's bedroom, her slippers were aligned exactly at the base of the bed, not kicked off, placed. In Dr. Sterling's bathroom, the towels were folded in a perfect stack, even though the room was a mess of blood, order in the midst of chaos. And then I saw it, the detail that made my blood run cold. In the photo of Julian Reed's loft, the tech CEO who hanged himself, there was a bookshelf in the background. It was blurry, but I could see the rows of vinyl records. And in the middle of the shelf, there was a gap. A small, rectangular gap where something had been removed. I grabbed the photo of Judge Ross's bedroom. On her nightstand, next to the lamp, a clean square in the dust. Something was missing. I sat back in the creaky wooden chair. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a cluster of suicides. This was a serial killer. But not a butcher. This was someone meticulous. Someone who came in, staged the scene, forced the death, and took a trophy. A small, rectangular trophy. I looked at the clock on the wall. 5:30 a.m. The city would be waking up soon. The delivery trucks would start rolling. The noise would return. I needed to talk to someone who knew the victims. But who connects a banker, a councilman, a judge, a surgeon, and a tech CEO? Money. They all had it. Power. They all wielded it. Corruption. In this city. That's a given. I packed the files into my satchel. I needed coffee. Strong black, and hot enough to burn the fatigue out of my eyes. I went to a diner 3 blocks away. The Greasy Spoon lived up to its name, but they let me sit in the back booth as long as I kept ordering refills. I spread my notebook out. I drew a circle with the 5 names. I tried to draw lines between them. Holloway had approved the zoning for Vane's new office complex. That was a link. Judge Ross had presided over a malpractice suit against Dr. Sterling 3 years ago. She ruled in his favor. That was a link. Julian Reed's company provided the IT infrastructure for the city courts. Link. It was a web. A tangled, incestuous web of favors and influence. They all knew each other. They all swam in the same shark tank. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're looking at the wrong gap." I stared at the screen. The number was blocked. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Look at the shoes. Look at the shoe." I froze. I hadn't written about the shoes yet. I hadn't told anyone but Miller about Vane's shoe on the grate. I typed, "What about them? They don't fit anymore." Then the line went dead. I tried calling it. Disconnected. I sat there, the diner noise fading into a buzz. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I was at the archives. Or someone knew I was at the scene. I looked at the photos again. Vane's shoe. I pulled up the photo of Councilman Holloway. He was in his car. He was wearing sneakers. Judge Ross was barefoot in bed. Dr. Sterling was barefoot in the tub. Julian Reed. I looked at the photo of the hanging. Julian Reed was wearing dress shoes, but his feet were dangling a foot off the ground. I grabbed a magnifying glass from my bag. Old habits die hard. I examined the photo of Reed's feet. The laces on his left shoe were tied in a double knot. The laces on his right shoe were tied in a single loop. I thought back to Vane. One shoe off. They don't fit anymore. What did that mean? I paid my bill and ran out into the rain. It was dawn now, a gray, miserable light filtering through the clouds. I needed to find the one person who could tell me about the bodies without the police filter. I needed to see Doc. Doc was the night shift medical examiner. We played poker on Tuesdays. He owed me $50. The morgue was in the basement of the hospital, a place of stainless steel and silence. I buzzed the intercom. "It's Jack," I said. "I brought donuts." The buzzer buzzed. Doc was at his desk eating a sandwich. He was a small man with thick glasses and a cheerful demeanor that was completely at odds with his profession. "Jack," he said. "You look terrible. Wet dog look is not in this season." "I need to see Arthur Vane," I said. Doc stopped chewing. "He just came in. I haven't even started the post." "I don't need the post. I just need to see his feet." Doc raised an eyebrow. "His feet. You have a fetish I don't know about, Jack. Just show me." He sighed and led me into the cooler. He pulled out a tray. The zipper sound was loud in the quiet room. Arthur Vane's face was pale waxy. I ignored it and looked down. His feet were bare now. Where are his socks? I asked. Logged in personal effects, Doc said. Look at his ankles, I said. Doc leaned in. What am I looking for? There. On the outer ankle bone of the right foot was a faint reddish mark. It looked like a friction burn. Ligature? Doc asked. No, I said. It's too small. I looked at the left ankle. Same mark. Check Holloway, I said. And Ross. Jack, I can't just pull. Check them, Doc. Please, he grumbled, but he went to the computer. He pulled up the autopsy photos for Holloway. Zoom in on the ankles, I said. He did. The resolution was high. There it was. Faint, almost invisible against the lividity, but there. A small abrasion on the ankle bone. What is that? Doc asked. Restraints. No, I whispered. It's not restraints, it's leverage. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the physics. If you want to throw someone off a balcony who doesn't want to go, you have to lift them. If you want to hang someone, you have to hoist them. But these marks, they were consistent. Das, I said. Did Vane have any drugs in his system, besides the scotch? I ran a quick talk screen. High levels of alcohol. And something else. We're still identifying it. Probably a sedative. Benzodiazepines, maybe. He was drugged, I said. He was drugged, so he couldn't fight. Then he was positioned. Positioned. The killer isn't just killing them, I said. He's posing them. Like dolls. I walked out of the morgue, my mind racing. The text message. The shoes. Look at the shoes. The shoes were a distraction. Or a clue. Vane's shoe was on the grate to make us look down. To make us see the fall. But the ankles told the story of the struggle. Or the lack of it. I needed to find the common thread. The person who had access to all of them. A doctor. A trainer. Then it hit me. The gaps on the bookshelves. The missing items. What do rich, powerful, stressed people all have in common? What do they all consume? Therapy. Or coaching. They buy peace of mind. I pulled out my phone and called the newsroom. Get me the financial records for Vane, Holloway, Ross, Sterling, and Reed. Look for payments to a clinic. Or a consultant. Look for the same name. I stood in the hospital parking lot, the rain soaking through my coat. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, and the fog was just starting to clear. It took 3 hours for the research desk to get back to me. In that time, I sat in my car, watching the city wake up. People with umbrellas rushed to jobs they hated. Taxis splashed through puddles. The world kept turning. Indifferent to the fact that a predator was culling the herd, my phone rang. It was Sarah from research. Jack, you owe me big time, she said. Her voice was tinny over the Bluetooth. Talk to me, Sarah. Okay, so I cross-referenced their personal accounts. It wasn't easy. These guys hide money better than they hide their mistresses. But I found a recurring payment for 3 of them. Vane, Holloway, and Reed. What's the name? It's not a person. It's a shell company called Aequitas Consulting. The payments are monthly, $5,000. Listed as retainer. What about Ross and Sterling? No direct payments. But both of them were on the board of a charity called the Second Chance Foundation. And guess who the primary vendor for counseling services is for that charity? Aequitas Consulting, I said. Bingo. Jack, who are these guys? The website is just a landing page. No team bios. Just a logo and a phone number. What's the logo? It's a scale. Like the scales of justice. But one side is tipped all the way down. Aequitas. Latin for equity, fairness, or vengeance depending on how you translate it. Send me the address, I said. It's in the Garment District, an old loft building, Suite 404. Thanks, Sarah. You're a lifesaver. Be careful, Jack. This feels weird. I hung up. The Garment District. That was the old city. Brick warehouses converted into overpriced studios. Dark alleys. I drove south. The rain had turned into a steady, gray drizzle. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fear. I wasn't a cop. I didn't have a gun. I had a notebook and a cynical worldview. Usually that was enough. Today I wasn't so sure. I parked a block away from the address. The building was a 6-story brick monolith. The fire escape zigzagged down the front like a rusty scar. I walked to the entrance. The buzzer panel was tarnished brass. Suite 4 and 4 just said 8C. I waited. A courier came out, and I caught the door before it clicked shut. The lobby smelled of wet wool and floor wax. The elevator was an old freight cage with a manual gate. I took the stairs, 4th floor. The hallway was dim. At the end, a frosted glass door with 404 stenciled in black. I knocked. Silence. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked again, harder. Hello. I'm looking for Aequitas Consulting. From inside, I heard a sound. A soft, rhythmic thudding. Thump. Thump. It sounded like a metronome. I put my ear to the glass. Behind the metronome, there was a voice. Low. Monotone. Speaking too fast to catch the words. I looked around the hallway. There was a fire extinguisher on the wall. I didn't want to break the door down, but the rhythm of that metronome was making my skin crawl. It sounded like a countdown. I checked the lock. It was a simple latch. I took out my credit card. It's a cliché, but on these old doors, it sometimes works. I slid the plastic between the frame and the bolt. I jiggled the handle. Click. The door swung open. The room was dark, lit only by a single lamp on a desk in the center. The walls were covered in soundproofing foam. It felt like a recording studio. Or a padded cell. In the center of the room there was a leather recliner, and sitting in it was a man. He was facing away from me. Hello, I called out. The chair didn't move. The metronome on the desk kept ticking. Thump, thump. I walked around the desk. The man in the chair was dead. He was older, maybe 60. White hair. He was wearing a pristine gray suit. His hands were folded on his lap, and on the desk, next to the metronome, was a typed note. I have balanced the books. I looked at the man's face. He looked peaceful. His eyes were closed. But then I saw his ankles, the same red marks, and on the shelf behind him, a row of objects. A small wooden clock, a silver picture frame, a ceramic figurine, a stapler, the trophies. This was the killer, and he had just become the final victim. Or so it seemed. I reached for my phone to call Miller. But then I noticed something. The metronome wasn't electric. It was wound up, and it was winding down. The rhythm was slowing. Thump, 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 sex, and then the voice I had heard earlier. It wasn't coming from the man. It was coming from a small speaker on the desk. It was a recording. You are not guilty of what you did. You are guilty of what you are. There is no redemption in living. The only balance is 0. You must subtract yourself. It was a hypnosis track. A suicide induction. I looked at the dead man again. I touched his neck. Cold. He had been dead for hours. But the metronome had been wound recently. Someone was here. I spun around. The door I had entered through clicked shut. I was alone in the soundproof room with a dead man, and a recording that was telling me to die. The lock tumbled. I ran to the door. Locked from the outside. Hey! I shouted. Open the door. My voice died in the foam on the walls. Then, the speaker clicked. The recording stopped. A new voice came on, a live voice, distorted but calm. Mr. Thorne, you are early. I haven't finished the narrative yet. So I looked around for a camera. A small red lens blinked in the corner of the ceiling. Who are you? I yelled at the camera. I am the auditor, the voice said. And you are the critic. It is fitting that you are here for the epilogue. You killed them, I said. You drugged them and talked them into dying. I facilitated their transition. The voice corrected. They were burdens on the system. Parasites. I merely convinced them to let go. And this man, I pointed to the corpse. That is Dr. Aris, the founder of Aequitas. He was hypocritical. He preached balance but hoarded wealth. He had to go first. I have been using his face for months. My mind raced. The killer wasn't the old man. The killer was someone who worked for him. An assistant, a protege. Why the shoes, auditor? Why the missing items? The items are collateral. The shoes represent the step they take. 1 foot in this world, 1 in the next. It is symbolic. It's sick, I said. It is art, he replied. And now, Mr. Thorne, we have a problem. You don't fit the pattern. You are not rich. You are not powerful. You are just noisy. A hiss filled the room. I looked down. Gas was seeping from the vents near the floor. "You're gonna gas me?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Make it look like an accident." "No," the voice said. "This isn't gas for you to inhale. It is for the spark." So I smelled it. Not natural gas. Something chemical. Accelerant. He was going to burn the building down. I looked around the room frantically. No windows. One door. Heavy steel. The desk. I grabbed the heavy brass metronome. "You think you're clever," I shouted at the camera. "But you made a mistake." "And what is that?" "You let me see the trophies." I smashed the metronome against the shelf. The glass of the picture frames shattered. "I know what you took from Vane," I yelled. "I know what you took from Reed. These aren't just trophies. They're evidence. Fingerprints!" "Fire cleanses everything, Mr. Thorne," said. The hissing got louder. I looked at the dead man, Dr. Aris. He was wearing a belt. A heavy leather belt. I ripped it off him. I ran to the door. The handle was a lever type. I looped the belt around the handle and pulled tight, bracing my foot against the wall. If he tried to open it to throw in a match, he'd have to fight my weight. But if he had a remote igniter, I had to get out now. I looked at the ceiling. The vents. They were pumping the gas in. That meant they connected to the outside air system. I dragged the heavy oak desk to the center of the room. I climbed on top of it. I could reach the vent grate. It was screwed in. I used the tongue of the belt buckle as a screwdriver. My hands were shaking. The smell of the accelerant was making me dizzy. One screw, two screws, the grate came loose. I pulled myself up. The duct was tight, dark, and greasy, but it was air. I shimmied into the shaft just as I heard a click from the room below. A spark. The dewy-ish UMP of ignition was deafening. The force of the blast slammed me upward against the metal of the duct. Heat roared at my feet. I crawled. I crawled like a rat escaping a sinking ship. The smoke was right behind me, a hot black monster. I saw light ahead, a grate leading to the roof, or another room. I kicked the grate out. I tumbled onto wet gravel, fresh air, rain. Beautiful cold rain. I was on the roof of the building. Smoke was billowing out of the vent I had just exited. I stood up coughing. My coat was singed. My eyebrows were gone. Across the roof, near the fire escape, a figure was standing, a silhouette in a raincoat. He was holding a remote control. He saw me, he froze. It wasn't a monster. It was a young man. Maybe 30, slim, glasses. He looked like an accountant, or an intern. The auditor, I presume. I rasped. He dropped the remote. He pulled a gun, of course. The intellectual pretension always ends with a cheap piece of lead. "You ruined the symmetry," he shouted over the wind. "It was supposed to be a clean burn. Life is messy, kid," I said. I started walking toward him. "Stay back." He aimed the gun. His hand was shaking. "You didn't shoot the others," I said. "You talked them to death. You drugged them. You're a coward who likes to play God from a distance. Can you actually pull a trigger?" "I balanced them," he screamed. "They were corrupt. And what are you? A murderer in a raincoat." He stepped back. He was close to the edge. The roof was slick. "Don't do it," I said. "Don't fall. That's too easy." He looked at the gun. He looked at me. He looked at the drop. "I can't be captured," he said. "The equation doesn't allow for variables." He raised the gun to his own temple. "Don't." I lunged forward. A shot rang out, but he didn't fall. He just dropped the gun. He clutched his shoulder, screaming. I looked behind me. Miller was coming up the fire escape, his service weapon smoking. "You talk too much, Jack," Miller yelled. "I told you to go home." Miller had followed me. The old dog still had a nose. We cuffed the kid. He was sobbing now. The auditor was just a terrified boy named Simon, an intern who had decided he was the judge of the world. I walked to the edge of the roof. The fire department sirens were wailing below. The rain was washing the soot off my face. The trophies were burning downstairs. The evidence was turning to ash. But we had the man. It didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like the end of a shift. The investigation wrapped up quickly after that. Simon Weiss was his name. He was a grad student in psychology who had been working for Dr. Aris. He had weaponized his mentor's techniques. He believed he was fixing the city's moral deficit one suicide at a time. The press ate it up. The suicide whisperer. The auditor of death. I wrote the story. It was a front-page feature. I detailed the shoes, the trophies, the notes. I gave the victims back their dignity, or at least, the truth of their murder, but I left one thing out. A week later, I was back in my apartment. It was still raining. It had been raining for a month. I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small box. I opened it. It was a shoe, a baby shoe, bronzed, and a note. You balance this equation, but there are other books. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Elegant, cursive script. Simon Wace was in a maximum security psychiatric ward. He didn't send this. Dr. Aris was dead. I looked at the baby shoe. It wasn't a trophy from the victims. It was something new. Or something very old. I realized then that Simon might have been the auditor. But he wasn't the architect. Someone had taught him. Someone had set him on this path. And that someone was still out there, watching, keeping score. I went to my window. I looked out at the city. The lights were blurring in the rain. I poured myself a whiskey. The case was closed for the police. For the public, the monster was in a cage. But for me, I put the baby shoe on my desk, next to my typewriter. The rain doesn't wash anything away. It just reveals what was hidden underneath. I sat down and fed a fresh sheet of paper into the roller. I had a new story to write. And this one was just beginning.